All right, is everybody ready?
Yes.
Fantastic. I am going to ask, if you are not already muted, to go ahead and mute yourself. If you have questions, we'll have you use the chat function and we'll talk about how to get to there in a minute. But I want to welcome everybody into this webinar. I'm going to do my best to look at my camera instead of over to my gallery screen, except for only occasionally, because I like to see your smiling faces, and check in on the chat to see if anybody has any questions. Okay, well, welcome to Everything Disc and Productive Conflict. This is the second free webinar series that we're kind of offering, or I'm offering, during our Corona isolation time, because we all need a little people time, I think. And I thought, why not take some chance to get some information out there? So we will begin. It is just 12:01, and so we'll get started. This is being recorded successfully this time, so I will also post this on my YouTube channel for Success Express Training and Development, as well as my Facebook page. Okay, so here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to do a quick review of DISC. Most people who have responded ahead of time that they were participating kind of understand it, so we're only going to spend about 3 or 4 minutes on that, if that much. We're going to talk about some cornerstone principles as it relates to conflict, because that's the theme of today's session. We're going to talk about how we all have natural reactions to conflict and what that result of those natural reactions are, and how they apply to our DISC personality style. Then we're going to talk about how each characteristics inside each style act as they're related to conflict, our focus point. And then we're going to do a little bit on working with other styles based upon conflict. Now, this is going to be a very broad, a very generic functioning webinar, so I won't have a lot of time to dig down to specifically your style and working with another individual style, but I'm going to give you resources that can provide help for that after we get done. All right, and then I'm going to finish up with talking about some comparison reports and ways that you can use this particular profile to work with people that you either work with on a one-on-one basis, that you lead, or maybe somebody that you live with and you want to have a better and more productive conflict conversation with them. And then finally, we'll just talk about some additional resources that you can take advantage of. Okay. If you want to interact with me and you are new to Zoom, there's a couple of things that you might want to do. If possible, turn your camera on, because then I can see a nodding head, a smiling face, a look of confusion, and I can see your face. If you're not in a position where you can have your camera on, that's absolutely fine. I know we have at least one phone in person. Camera's not going to work for them, of course. If you want to see other smiling faces, you can use the gallery view, which is in the upper right corner. If you're only seeing me right now, I will tell you that's been known to be confusing for some people. There is also an option for a group chat, and if you do the drop down or the menu bar below on the bottom of your screen, it's on the top of mine, you should see a chat, or you'll see a more, and you can click on the more and select the chat screen, and that's where you can put your questions in. So and that's a great way for you to interact with me during the course of the session. And I'll try to get to your questions, but I'll also have an open time near the end where you can ask questions and we can get off mute and maybe do that. Okay, let's first go with kind of the review of the DISC model. For those of you who maybe have just a cursory understanding of it and you want to get a better idea before we get started, essentially the DISC model is a 4-quadrant approach to understanding personality. The first upper left quadrant is the D style. That stands for dominant. And you can think of the dominant personality as someone who is direct. They're tough-minded, strong-willed, and forceful. They tend to take charge of a situation when they go into it right away. And they're very enthusiastic and engaged about leadership and about taking control. To the right of that, in the top right quadrant, is influence. And that is the outgoing, enthusiastic, lively personality. I consider this almost the cheerleader style. If you think about that person that's always bubbly, the strong eye, that's where they fall onto it. I talked about it in my last session about intensity, so that plays into these styles as well. The lower right corner is S, or steady. These are even-tempered, accommodating. This is the caretaker style. They're the empathetic. They're the ones that go along to get along. They tend to be very much just focused on maintaining the status quo and keeping the peace. And then to the left, of the bottom left side, is your C or conscientious style. They are your numbers person, your analytical, your reserved. And when I say numbers, I mean the concept of numbers. If they don't have the aptitude for it, that may not be true, but it's that structured environment that they need, that detail, dot your I, cross your T. Precise, private, very reserved side to it. And of course, our D's and our I's share an outgoing personality, and our C's and our S's share more of an introverted style of personality. Our I's and our S's share a very trusting approach to the world, and the D's and the C's share a very strong typical leaning towards skeptical version of society until they learn to trust. So that's a quick review of the DISC model. I hope I didn't go too fast for anybody on that. Like I said, I will be going back to doing the intro to DISC later, and we can put that up there if you struggled with it, or you can reach out to me if you have any questions. So let's get specifically into the profile that we're talking about today, and that's the concept of the productive conflict profile. This is a new assessment that's offered by Wiley, and it's kind of taking it from the next level over the Everything DISC workplace profile that I focused on my last webinar. In this one, what we do is we explore your basic personality style, of course, establishing the benchmark of that, but then it looks at specifically how that style replies into conflict. Now, I have trained on a lot of different personality profiles, a lot of them DISC-based. And this has got to be one of my favorite tools because I think it is applicable for every single person, whether they are somebody who works with other people directly, whether they work with them indirectly, or they just have a relationship with another person. When you have two people that understand their DISC profile and how they're going to respond when a negative emotion takes control, it can completely change the way you communicate with people. And that's what I love about this profile, because it just shines a spotlight onto what your natural reactions are going to be when threatened, and how we can take a break and stop that cycle before it just spirals and becomes a very, very strong negative reaction. Okay, so what we want to talk about here are some basic cornerstone principles about the word conflict. We need to all be on the same page when I talk about conflict. Conflict is essentially any disagreement between two parties. It can be very, very small, or it can be great big. What we have to understand about conflict, though, is most people tend to view conflict as something to be avoided at all costs. And the exact opposite is true. Conflict can be something that creates positive forward motion because it forces conversations. So what we have to understand is that conflict is an inevitable part of workplace and family relationships, and it can be productive. That's what I really want you to grab onto. If you could take nothing away from this session except for the fact that conflict can be productive, it's important, because that's where we get forward progress. I remember years and years ago when I was working with the church that I was in, and I was in a leadership position, and we had a very contentious issue go in front of the church body, and we had a vote. And for the first time, there was a vote of 100 yays and 20 nays instead of a rubber stamp of sure, yes, whatever, yes, and 100% unanimous decision. And what I told the 20 that voted no, the 20 who voted on the opposite side of me during that, was how thankful I was of them, because their negative position, their contrarian position, caused the conversation to be had in detail so that we could all get to the point with whether we agreed or disagreed with the issue, we could go forward as a unified body. And that's what conflict does in a relationship or in a workplace. It allows for the conversation to be had and people's voices to be heard, and then forward motion to take place. So understand that conflict is productive. Conflict interactions may be influenced by other factors. There's a lot of things that we bring to the conflict situation. We bring our personality style, which is what we're going to focus on today, but there's other things that we bring as well, such as previous experiences, instances of stress, trauma that have happened to us that can affect how we respond into that conflict. If somebody's on their chat, I just realized I did not put my headphones in. If I'm getting any kind of echo, would you give me a yes or a no in the chat so that I can fix that as we go forward? Okay, so yes, we're going to talk about personality styling right now, but great, no echo. Okay, fabulous, thank you. But specifically understand that this isn't the catch-all. There's some other baggage that we bring into a conflict scenario that if we're not aware of, it will impact us and affect us. And awareness is a primary source of what we're talking about today. And this is another one. Your response to conflict situations is in your control. A lot of people are reactionary. They let life happen to them. They let conflict happen to them. They feel as though they are being attacked when something happens. But the reality is your response should and always can be in your control. Caveat here, separation. A healthy, emotionally stable person can keep their responses in control. I'm not dealing with somebody, not talking about somebody who has an established mental illness. But aside from that, what we want to do through this session is get you to figure out, okay, where's that point in a conflict situation where I let the control get away from me, and then how do I grab it and put it back into play? The next cornerstone principle is that when we learn about others' disc styles, it helps us understand their conflict behaviors. So once we figure out where our checkpoint is and what our natural response is going to be, we can then take it to the next level and look at that person and go, okay, they responded to my statement because they're a D personality, because they're an I personality, because they're an S, because they're a C. That's why they took what I did not think was going to cause a problem. They took it as a problem. And so we can start to backtrack or hopefully proactively change the way we communicate to get it inside their personality style to avoid them shooting toward the negative response right off the bat. And finally, your conflict can become more productive when you use DISC to more effectively engage with others. And so that's kind of the theme that we are going along as we go. Okay, so conflict and our response. Oh, I've got a couple people that are saying they do have an echo. All right, I'm going to go ahead and put my headphones in here. So give me a second, and hopefully this will take it away as we go. Usually what happens when the headphones go in is it eliminates the speakers from the computer feeding back. We'll see. All right. So here's what happens when we have conflict. We tend to, somebody says something to us, somebody does something, we may even see an action happen, and our brain triggers an automatic thought that is generated from both our life experiences, but also our personality style. The first place people go is to a destructive response because they are operating out of a biological, genetic, evolutionary fight or flight response that happens. The reason we go negative when we see conflict into a destructive response is because conflict historically has indicated something that is a danger to our life. And that is still deeply intertwined into us. And we have to figure out a way to stop and break that and go, okay, am I really in danger here? Or is this conflict something that is more constructive or more positive? And so the process of DISC is to create kind of a reframe part, a moment in the action where we take a break and we set the automatic thought aside, step back, look at the situation, reframe it from a different perspective. Okay, is how do I move forward and achieve a positive response and then have a productive response that goes in there? So, because what we want out of every conflict situation is improvement instead of backtracking. The flight part of our biological evolution is the flight. Most people, in most instances, we took off and we ran. So when we get into conflict now, we either run or we lash out to try to put a defensive up before we can get away from the situation. And if you know anybody, maybe even yourself, that's been in conflict situations and you kind of watch them shut down and give you that proverbial fine and walk out of the room, that's because they're stuck. They're not in that reframe part where they're willing to follow the conflict situation to a resolution. And what we want to do is talk about resolution. Okay, when you have the everything DISC productive conflict assessment, and you've taken it and you have it in front of you, you get this page, which I absolutely love this page, because what it does is it shines a huge spotlight right on your personality style and how you are going to respond when conflict approaches you. And that's the most important step, because you understanding your triggers and what sets you off helps you respond and not have them become automatic triggers. Have them be something that you can evaluate and use as either a tool in a conflict situation or set aside and move in and find a replacement, a better tool to get to where you want to go. Okay, so for example, in this narrative, you'll see on this is actually my assessment. I'm bearing my soul with you today. Right here, I pulled a paragraph out, and what it says right here is most likely you want to be seen as projecting strength and as someone of authority. If you know me personally, you know that is spot on true. Therefore, when there's a difference of opinions, my instinct is to try to influence others by asserting your views in a forceful and dominant way. While this approach is likely due to the confidence you have in your ideas, others may feel overpowered or disregarded by this behavior at times. Now, I imagine you know somebody in your life who is a strong personality just like me. And you can say, you know what, that's exactly what they do. When I give them a difference of opinion, they become very forceful or dominant. I'll tell you, I was extremely guilty of this in my youth especially. If somebody disagreed with me, I was going to convince them why they were wrong, almost as though it was a competition. I needed to win every single argument. So my goal was not to, what I had to learn through this, once I identify, oh, that's my issue, is that winning an argument by overpowering somebody gets me nowhere. If I win an argument simply by dominating them, then that is going to intimidate them from working with me in the future, and then they're not going to give any valuable opinions or any opinions at all that I can then mold into where I want to go. Again, the goal of conflict isn't to win the situation. It is to bring multiple opinions in, have a conversation, hash them out, and generate a new idea that moves your organization, yourself, your job, your relationship further down the line than it was where you go. So that's why I think this page is so important, because again, we're shining that spotlight on how are you likely to react? And then how is that going to affect other people? And each one of these paragraphs address that in multiple different ways. Okay, so kind of overviewing all 4 different styles. And if you know your style, or you know the people you work with or live with styles, you can kind of place them into this grid here. We'll notice that each of the 4 styles has a word that says words under destructive tendencies and productive tendencies. If you want to kind of put a visual on this graph that you're seeing here, the words outside of the circle are our natural default tendencies when faced with conflict. Most likely because we're going to first operate from fear, from a worry, from a point of, is somebody out to get me? And not paranoid, not that far extreme, but that survival level. The words under productive are inside the circle, because that's after we have that reframe point, and we reframe the situation to go, okay, this is not a dangerous conflict situation. This is a potentially productive conflict situation. So let's take the D again, because I want to talk about myself. It makes it easier. Then that way I'm not, I'm just being clear that any jokes are all about me. All right, so my natural negative tendency is to be insensitive, to be impatient, to create that win-lose situation, to refuse to bend and overpower others. I am such a strong personality because I'm so far to the edge of the circle on my D that 9 times out of 10, I'm either going to win the situation or I'm going to destroy the relationship. I could do that if that's what I wanted to do, if I did that without a check on me. But since I don't always want to win situations, I want to win at life, I try to go towards the productive tendencies, which means I'm still going to be straightforward with my opinions. I'm not going to give up who I am, but I'm going to acknowledge tough issues and say that, okay, this may be a problem for you, that we may disagree, or you may see it from a different point of view, that this is not as a black and white where I'm right and you have to be wrong. That an objective to debate where both sides are heard is something I'm willing to do. When I bring all of that into the conflict situation, now all of a sudden the other person becomes human in front of me. And we're getting to a singular place where we both agree. Or if we can't get to a place where we both agree, we get the agree to disagree position. Or as an organization goes, and let's take this brick of conflict across a room of 5 or 10 or 15 people, when the decision is made at the end, all of the voices are heard at that point, and you can get to a consensus where everybody in the organization is leaving the table with a unified voice. Maybe not a unified agreement, but a unified voice. I've served on several boards of directors, and a lot of times we got to the point with decisions where we were not going to get to a decision everybody agreed on, but we were going to try to get to a decision that everybody could support. And so once the vote was taken and the meeting was left, it's kind of, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happens in the boardroom stays in the boardroom. And we could all go forward with the unified goal of delivering the message in one way. We're seeing that happen in society right now. When you got I guarantee you that on the task force that is making decisions for our country, there is not 100% agreement. We are in uncharted territories. We do not know what's going to happen today, tomorrow. We don't even know what happened yesterday. So they're bringing into these meetings all of these experts in their fields with what they think is going to happen, what they foresee is going to happen, and wishes and desires to move forward with different motivations. Some people want to just have a complete 100% isolation. Other people are affected, want to worry about the economy. All of that is coming into play in those meetings, but when they go and they have the briefing, they try to have a unified voice because they hash it out through a series of productive conflicts. And I would love to be a fly on the wall during those meetings because you're probably seeing exactly what we're talking about today play out on a grand and very, very vital and important scale. Okay, so when we're working with other styles, inside the assessment, if you were to choose to take yours, you're going to get 4 different pages based upon your style and how they're going to work with the 4 different quadrants. So you'll see in the upper left corner the conflict with the D style. So this would be me butting heads with somebody who has the same style I have. So you can imagine 2 Ds going in the room, both wanting to win the argument. There's a strong, strong, strong urge to win the argument between the 2 of them. And how those 2 are going to have to adapt and adjust their style to each other to get through the conflict is going to be different than, say, maybe a D, again, me, and the next one down here in the bottom where it's on the S style, who I would tend to very easily run over. Now, I'll tell you, without either party, a D or an S, adapting in a conflict situation, the conflict's going to go simply like this. I'm going to walk in the room and I'm going to say, we need to do this. And the S is going to go, are you sure? And I'm going to say, absolutely. This is what we need to do because I've already thought about it and I've already made a decision and this is what's going to happen. And the S is going to go, okay, and go back to their desk and then sit there and go, wow, I can see this whole thing blowing up in 2 days. And in 2 days when it blows up, there's going to be a crisis, and this person's going to be stressed for 2 whole days, knowing something's coming. But since I ran over them, they're not going to feel comfortable doing anything to try to stop the crisis. To reverse that situation, what I would want to do is to go in and say, hey, we have a problem. There is something coming down the pipe. I have some great ideas that I think can avoid the problem, but I want to get your input. What do you think about this? Bring those in, validate their positions. If they're off the wall, still validate how they feel, figure out a way to work it. If it has concrete issues, say, hey, I had not even thought about that. This was my idea. How do we incorporate those 2? Because 2 ideas added together are almost always better than 1. And that's how you adapt your style to work with these others. And we don't have enough time to get into role playing and working through a lot of these, but you kind of take that gist and extrapolate it over to the I's and the C's as well. That's in there. What I really love about these pages are that there is this gray box at the middle that simply says, how can you have productive conflict with the D style, the I style, the S style, the C style? For in this particular instance, we're talking about D against a D, would be to refrain from getting into a power struggle. No one person has to be the one who wins. Reflect on the situation and be willing to compromise. Take turns speaking and avoid talking over each other. Now, if you've ever been in a situation like this, you know that's easier said than done if both parties aren't engaged in wanting to get to the productive result. And that's where understanding, growth, and maturity comes into play. And sometimes you have to be the only one going, okay, I'm going to let you talk till you're tired of talking. And then we'll move on because you're not participating in this on an equal level. Or maybe we can take a break from this situation until we can have a conversation amongst equals. All right. So here's a quick review of how all 4 styles might respond in a conflict situation. If you look at the Ds, they want victory, they want results, they want a sense of personal accomplishment. What happens when they are too much of a D in conflict? They have a need to win, they're impatient, they're blunt. But what triggers them is that they have a fear of being taken advantage of or appearing weak. So if you threaten that, they're going to get back into a corner like a raccoon. On the I style, they want approval, they want understanding, they want open communication. They tend to be overly passionate at times and can be impulsive and say things without thinking them. So if you're not an I and that's you're responding to that, you kind of have to go, okay, they haven't really thought that through yet, and that's okay. They have a fear of being rejection, of their voice not being heard or disapproved. So really important with an I is I see how I know how you feel, or I understand how you feel, or what I think you're saying is, and repeating back to them so they feel that they are heard. On the S style, they really are motivated by an agreement and acceptance, a sense of peace. So the conflict, volume of the conflict has to be brought down so that it doesn't appear that there is a disagreement going on. They are overused when they're passive, so much so to try to bring that volume down. They don't say anything, that they overly compromise without taking their legitimate thoughts, their ideas, from their background, from their knowledge base into consideration, and they just give up too soon. And their fears are letting people down or having to face that strong personality. They really, really hate that. These are the people that run from conflict. They're not going to get backed into a corner because they're going to dig a hole and bury their head. And then on the C style in conflict, there's a fairness, there's a rational decisions and accuracy. That's what they want. They just want it to be right when it's done. Their overuses from the personality are rigidness. They will get very stubborn, that they want to analyze it too much, and that they want to be cautious, overly cautious. They want restraint. Their fears are being wrong and having a strong display of emotion. So making sure that they're not triggered with an outburst, because that's going to shut them down, because they're going to feel like they need to save face or that they've already lost face. Okay. So the next level, as we move into this, we're only at 12:27, so we're going to have lots of time for questions, which is great. But I want to tell you about this great opportunity when it comes to everything DISC. And this one applies no matter what assessment you take, but it really works well inside the conflict one. But even if one person has taken the everything DISC workplace and one's taken the leadership, or one's taken the leadership, or one's taken the productive conflict, if you have two people who have taken an everything DISC assessment, you have an opportunity to create a comparison report between you. So what this allows you to do is it takes your full style, not just your D, I, S, or C, but your full dot location on the circle that represents D, I, S, C, and another person's, their primary style, their secondary style, any priorities that are offset onto that, and meld those two together and identify where you work well together and where you don't work well together. So, for example, this is a comparison report between Paula and I, and my wife. And if you know us, you know that we work together all the time. We live together. We both work from home. We are together a lot, especially right now. I mean, it is a lot. And so our styles, although they are complementary in many ways, have a natural trigger and friction point between them. I am a stronger D than she is, but she has enough D in there that there can be that two cats in a room argument level. She is a high I, which means she can be very impulsive and sometimes not as detail oriented as I need to make sure that I have control of the situation. Because one of my secondary priorities is accuracy, and that's hugely important to me. So there are points where we're going to not get along, and there's going to be points where we're going to get along too much. So what the comparison report does is it breaks down all of our priorities and where we fall on a spectrum and identifies to us what might be an issue associated with it. So for example, typical of Paula's I style is that she expresses enthusiasm in keeping things fun. She takes action, makes quick progress. On my style, my DI style is initiating action toward bold outcomes and accomplishing rapid results. So you've got two people that have results, rapid results, action, taking bold initiative put together. That's great. It means that we love action and doing things and forward motion. The bad part is it can lead us to leaping before we look, and sometimes making decisions that aren't best. like starting a lot of different businesses, which we've done over the years. Sometimes they've succeeded and sometimes they've not, because we are not very risk averse. By being aware of that, we try to check and go, okay, instead of being a coal on the fire or flames on the wood on the fire to each other's passion and desire to move forward, one of us sometimes has to check our behavior when an idea is thrown out there and go, okay, that's your idea. Maybe how do we talk about it? How do we evaluate it before forward motion? That's an example of two who have the same style having to check each other. Then there's continuums where we are on the exact opposite. And instead of trying to check each other, we are overly checking each other, and it becomes an issue of having to try to meet in the middle. These comparison reports are wonderful because they are absolutely free. So when you are logged in and you have purchased any kind of assessment from Success Express, you get a MyEverythingDisc account. It is a myeverythingdisc.com account where your assessments are stored. And anybody else in the entire Wiley Disc network who's taken into this an Everything Disc assessment, and has set up their MyEverythingDisc account, you can reach out to them and ask to have a comparison report made. So whether it's you and your significant other, whether it's you and a team member, whether it's you and a supervisor, whether it's you and a coworker, if you're both in this system and you're going to be doing a project, or you're going to have a leading mentoring relationship or mentoring leading relationship, you can generate for free this comparison report and kind of get an understanding of where your barriers and your blockings are. In couples coaching that Paula and I are working on, a lot of times these are the type of conversations that we have is, okay, what are your primary passions, desires, personality tendencies for each of you, and then how do they meld together in both a positive and a negative way? We want the positives to be only positive and not get carried away. We want the negatives to be identified and worked through and built on, so that then they can become something we're taking that checkpoint that we talked about earlier into the situation and going, okay, I see why you feel that way. It's valid. This is why I feel this way, which is also valid. So how do we reach that place on the continuum that's closer to the middle without you giving up who you are, or me giving up who I am, or me giving up what's important to me, or you giving up what's important to you? And compromise isn't always meeting in the middle. Compromise is about protecting each individual's importance and each individual's priorities in a way that's productive for forward motion. Compromise, and that's just a matter of you give up half and I give up half, usually gets us stuck right in the middle with nothing in terms of forward accomplishment. Okay, if you want to unmute, you can. If you want to type a question, you can. I would love to open it up right now to anybody who has a specific question. Maybe I went too fast. Maybe you want me to go back over something. You can either kind of wave at me with your hands up if I can see you. You can text. Do we have anybody that has a question jumping out at them? Wow, I am so good. I really just covered this really well. Okay, Amy, you put a yes again. Does that mean you have a question? Nope, that was just a yes. Okay. All right. Well, I am available here for questions going forward. If you've got anything, if you want to know about how to get stuff, I'm going to cover that in this next session. So let's talk about some more opportunities. If you were fascinated by this concept of productive conflict, I would encourage you to take an Everything Disc productive conflict assessment. Even if you've done a DISC assessment before, it is still valuable to have this extra narration. It talks more specifically about where you're going. Somebody had mentioned recently, since my last session, about kind of how is DISC adapting to the growing, changing world of assessments and workplace tools. And this generation we are in now with DISC has kind of evolved beyond the Everything DISC classic most people are used to. What we're doing now with it is we're being more very circumstance specific with our assessments. We are creating ones that apply to conflict management, leadership, The one I talked based on with the last one was workplace, and it was more the closest to the Everything Disc Classic that we've done before. But beyond that, we're now looking at what's your role? What are you trying to get out of it? We have an emotional intelligence one that's coming online. So we've got lots of different opportunities where you can go, okay, I want to take what I understand about DISC, but I want to build it to the next level. When you get into the productive conflict, again, it's my favorite product, absolutely my favorite product they've come out with, because it is powerful as a standalone. You take it, you figure out where are my triggers based upon my personality. Why do I tend to feel like I'm throwing gasoline on fires all the time, and how do I avoid doing that? But when you pair it with another person's assessment of productive conflict, now you really have a way to deepen communication and understand where they're coming from. So if you want to work in a relationship-centered portion with DISC, this is huge to have both of you take this assessment. I also have a screen that's not advancing. There it is. You may be familiar that years ago I wrote a book called Growing Up Pink. It talks about all kinds of lessons. The reason I'm putting it on there right now is because if you want a discount on these products, you can until April 4th go to successexpressmp.com and use discount code COVID-19 and get a 25% discount on both of those products. Again, that's a limited time. That's only until April 4th. You get 25% off of both the Productive Conflict Profile and Growing Up Pink. You don't have to buy both of them. You also can get 25% off of the Everything DISC Workplace Assessment. Now, the Productive Conflict is the more expensive of the two. Everything DISC Workplace is the more broader one. It's a little bit less expensive. So if you just want the entry level, that would be the one I would recommend. You can find it on my website as well. But if you want to get into two people communicating, or that it seems like you're always in an argument with people, then Productive Conflict is the one I recommend for you. Also, I am working during this time of virtual to get my business coaching into a virtual environment. Been doing this for years, so there are some opportunities with that. If you mention that you watched either this webinar or the last one, you'll get a 50% discount off of coaching times, off your first coaching time. So that's an option as well. You can reach out to me at kirbykirk@successexpressmp.com. You can reply to one of the emails that you'll get as a follow-up from this, and I can give you much more information about that. And then last thing, that if you just want to have a little fun, you're stuck at home, you're self-isolating, and you need some entertainment that is not the Tiger King, that I will recommend for you. Our website, or our podcast that my wife and I do, it's Love and Jesus Juice. It is a free podcast available on Google Play, on iTunes Podcast, on Spotify, any of your major podcast platforms. We basically sit with a glass of wine and have a conversation about becoming better. Whether that's better inside our relationship, better, it's our front porch conversations that we've had for years. We just record them and put them on it. They are great, they're entertaining, they're fun. And the more people who listen to them, the happier we are. So, listen to them and make us happy. All right, that is it. Again, I'll give you one last chance. If you have any questions, throw them out. I've got a couple of minutes here. All right. Shoot them out if you want to. If you want to share this with anybody, I will put an email out as soon as I have it up on my Success Express YouTube page. Thank you very much and have a great day.